Okay. You're listening to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981.
And now, here's your host.
Welcome back to the program. I'm Zev Brenner. We always decry assimilation, acculturation, intermarriage, and we're doing something on college campuses. But yet, the real education of those who are not steeped in Jewish tradition really begins much earlier than college. Rabbi Micah Greenland joins us, the international director of NCSY, where they work with high school kids to try to bring them a little closer to Judaism. He's been at the helm for 9 years. Rabbi Micah Greenland, thank you for joining us.
A pleasure, Zev. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. Thank you. So just tell our audience about NCSY. I remember NCSY from 30 years ago when it was just, maybe it started earlier. It was just a small group, but it's really grown and expanded throughout the United States and beyond. So tell us about the mission of NCSY, the National Conference of Synagogue Youth, right?
Correct. Yeah. So we actually dropped the full name a few years back when we realized we're no longer just national, we're international. We're no longer just a conference of youth groups of synagogues, but we're really meeting Jewish teens wherever they are. But it was National Conference of Synagogue Youth. Now just NCSY. The mission really.
Some people ask you what it stands for.
Many people do. So either I'll give them that honest answer of it used to stand for NCS for National Conference of Synagogue Youth, and now we've since dropped the full name. But many times I like to say it stands for Nothing Can Stop You. That's NCSY. Nothing can stop you.
Good answer. So what's the mission of NCSY? Because I would assume when our landscape has changed, there's more people who are steeped in irreligion, because America has changed according to the Pew Reports. It's not just Jews and Christians are less religious, which means that there's more challenging for you with an organization as NCSY.
No question. And what we're working to achieve is to inspire in all Jewish teens the desire to learn and grow to their individual potential as Jews and as members of the Jewish community. So that really captures both the public school audience, the assimilated audience that we're working to inspire, who really don't know an aleph from a beis. I've never been introduced, and we are the we are the portal through which they gain some introduction to what Jewish life is about. And it's also for those teens who were raised Orthodox, who may not have substantial enough appreciation. They have the basics they're learning in school, and more than the basics, they're getting a great education in school. But it's not necessarily that their davening is a meaningful davening or their Shabbos is a meaningful Shabbos. And NCSY is trying to inspire in those Jews as well the desire to learn and grow to their potential.
So how do you get, and we'll turn to the Orthodox kids in a little bit, how do you get the non-Orthodox teens to go to an NCSY, to be involved, considering a lot of them growing up where they may not be exposed to Judaism at all? So how do you get them to a Jewish environment?
It's a phenomenal question. And there are many different ways, but the strongest way is a program that was started by my predecessor, Rabbi Steve Berg, who's now at the helm of Esha Torah. And that's a program called Jewish Student Union, JSU, where through public schools themselves that have after-school elective clubs or lunchtime elective clubs that a kid can go to chess club or French club or anything else they're interested in learning about, Save the Whales Club. We have Jewish Student Union clubs that are an opportunity for a kid to come have a slice of kosher pizza and learn something about what's a timely message in Jewish life. They meet other Jewish students and they learn something that resonates. They do a Jewish project, a craft project, or ask questions to a Jewish role model. That's the Jewish Student Union Club. We have nearly 300 such clubs across the United States and Canada that meet, like I said, mostly either after school or during lunch. We have some that meet before school. That's for the real determined who want to show up at 7 a.m. for a Jewish club before school. And it's through those clubs that we meet 12,000 public school teens each year. And it's through those clubs that we have the opportunity both to introduce them to Jewish programming and a Jewish message in the public school environment. Since it's extracurricular, we're allowed to provide a cultural Jewish message in that environment.
You can't give a religious Jewish message, correct?
Right. Exactly. This is educational in nature. It's not. We're not praying in the clubs. But
Can you make a bracha on the pizza?
We can make a bracha on the pizza. Okay. That's
it's
part
not
of
considered
part of the
public school
education of
rules?
what we do. That's not. But it's a great. This was actually it's a fascinating case of how this was challenged when Christian groups were doing this in schools in the early 1980s. How it was challenged, brought to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court actually ruled that this is appropriate since it's extracurricular and it's optional. That schools can have outside facilitation of religious groups of some kind, but we still avoid praying in the clubs to the extent possible. But as we're meeting 12,000 Jewish teens a year in this environment, it's also an opportunity. They connect to our staff. They build a relationship with the role model. And then through that, the other opportunities that staff person is offering, a weeknight latte and learning program, a Friday night Shabbat dinner at the advisor's house, even a summer trip to Israel, are all opportunities that are then afforded to those students. So they may not have known about it before they came to the club, but the club was an easy way for them to access a relationship with a staff member. The club's right there in their public high school. And we're offering free food. And once they come, if they like it, then they're likely to follow that staff person.
I guess if they're Jewish, the free food would be attractive to them. That's part of the Jewish DNA.
Because again, it's in the public schools. We're actually open to whoever wants to attend, and we've had many, the students on the football team who are the hungriest. Often have attended clubs, not necessarily all Jewish, and maybe the common denominator is at the end of a public school day at 3:00, everybody's hungry. So Jewish and non-Jewish, it seems to have appeal.
So here's my question, because it's impressive. You have thousands of Jewish students that go to the Jewish Student Union that you have on 300 different places throughout the United States and Canada. But with Jews assimilating, they don't really stick to Jewish identity. So I'm surprised that they're going to a Jewish student club, because as assimilating culture, right, being Jewish is not cool, right? At least in some circles that are. So how do you get around? Is it the food that brings them in? So what brings them in? They can go to any other club.
Yeah. So I think there are many answers to that question. One of the answers is what surprises some people. Is that we actually, our strongest clubs are in the schools with smaller Jewish populations. Not, you could have a public school of 3,000 students. You might have 1,000 Jewish kids. You would think, we have 1,000 Jewish kids. Our club probably has 300, 200. Not necessarily. We have large clubs often in schools that there's 50 Jewish kids in the school, and 40 of them will come to our club. And the reason for that is because they know they're Jewish. It's not a religious thing to them. It's not an observance thing to them, but it is an identity thing to them. They know they're Jewish, and often they feel lonely for being Jewish. And in a school where let's say there's 50 Jewish kids out of 2,000 kids, it's very easy for those kids to feel lonely and cast aside. So those are the kids who will seek out a Jewish club. This is my one opportunity a week to feel like I'm part of a Jewish group.
But they feel like a minority the rest of the time, because if it's
correct.
Strong Christian identity, whether it's in the South or other parts of the country. So especially around Christmas time or Easter, you may feel left out. So you may want to affiliate. So I can understand the logic behind that. As a place we have a lot of Jews, there's no need they don't feel a need to go to a Jewish club.
That's precisely the case. Exactly. So, when there's half the school is Jewish, the kids don't necessarily feel that motivation. They feel I'm Jewish all the time, and half my friends are Jewish, or all my friends are Jewish. They don't feel the same motivation.
Rabbi Micah Greenland is our guest, International Director of NCSY, and they bring Jews closer to their Jewish roots through public schools and working with teens. Rabbi Greenland, we're looking at tremendous curve. We're trying to educate Jewish kids about Judaism. You mentioned about going to Israel. I know Birthright works with college kids. Is that an active part of NCSY to send Jewish teenagers to Israel at no charge?
So at no charge would be lovely, but that's at heavily discounted prices is where I'll meet you. Birthright is a 10-day experience, and through all of the worldwide donors to Birthright, they make that a free experience for the participants. What we offer are summer trips, which are between 4 and 6 weeks in length. And we have, for our public school participants, heavily discounted those trips for years. We do a lot of fundraising specifically around subsidizing our public school summer trips to Israel. We call that the Jerusalem Journey, the Ann Sampson Jerusalem Journey, or TJJ. And Sampson family is one of the generous benefactors of that program that named it after Ann Sampson, Alaa Shalom. And that's a program that we have brought increasing numbers of public school teens, as many as 600 or 700 in a summer, for many years.
Did that change during COVID?
So during summer of 2020, there were no summer trips to Israel, and actually post-COVID, or it's hard to say,
Hopefully,
pre-post,
God willing.
exactly. Summer of 2021, when we were able to run trips, it was sort of during COVID, but catching lightning in a bottle, where organized trips such as ours were allowed to come into Israel, even though the general tourist public was not allowed in at that time. That actually was our largest summer ever. We brought between public school kids alone was over 800 participants on our program that summer. Many of whom had wanted to go the previous summer in 2020, because that was canceled. We were doubling up and getting some kids in 2021 who had originally registered and then couldn't go in 2020. And then in addition to that, we had over 1,000 day school kids on our trips. So we had nearly 2,000 students in Israel this past summer, and a lot of that, I want to mention, is due to the generosity of the Marcus Foundation, led by Bernie Marcus, who founded Home Depot, who recently began offering subsidies to teens of all backgrounds to go on Israel trips. He's primarily focused on the public school population, and that's where these vouchers are going forward. But it really also has helped keep the prices very low. A public school kid can go to Israel in the summer for under $3,000, which is while Birthright is free, that's 10 days. $3,000 for 4 weeks is
That's a great question. My question is, there are probably some
phenomenal.
kids that can't afford it. So, and I can listen. It's easy for me to say here because I'm not running NCSY. But if Birthright is successful with college kids, really the education should begin early. I believe very much in the high school kids, even elementary. It should really start. So if you're able to, and I would assume when they come back from Israel, they're charged. They're more Jewishly identified, connected, want to be more part of the Jewish people when they come back. So perhaps, either through Birthright or some other philanthropies, maybe they should concentrate more on subsidizing high school kids to spend more time in Israel instead of 2,000. Bring 10,000.
Absolutely, that's precisely the goal of the Route One initiative, which is funded by the Marcus Foundation, and it's precisely our goal as well. We have been for over a decade I call it the industry leader, the field leader in bringing more Jewish teens to Israel in the summer than any other organization in the world. College students is a Birthright realm, as you've noted, but high school kids, we have been for over a decade bringing more kids each summer than any other organization. And this initiative now allows us to be able to keep the prices low, and as well as introducing ongoing improvements to the educational quality. So these experiences are cheaper and more impactful than they've ever been. God willing, from your mouth to God's ears, we should continue to grow.
We should speak to Home Depot people. They should call it the Jewish Home Depot. That's what they believe in. They should go to. So we got to change. We got to put a little more Jewish into the Home Depot.
Yeah, that's very well said. It's very well said. But I definitely, that's my plug. That all of the home improvement stores are great, but Home Depot in particular seems to that
Great metaphor.
that revenue is Jewish home, is supporting the Jewish home strengthening.
I neglected to mention that Rabbi Micah Greenland is our guest, International Director of NCSY. They're part of the Orthodox Union, so they fund the work that NCSY does, but you have to do fundraising extra on your own, correct?
That's correct. Roughly a third of our funding comes from the Orthodox Union. Roughly a third of our funding comes from what parents pay for programs, particularly summer programs, and roughly a third we are fundraising each year. So that's
on a yearly basis.
It's nearly $45 million nationally.
$45 million a year. Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. Wow.
That's obviously grown from your early years of exposure to NCSY substantially. The OU investment has grown over the years, and substantially the fundraising has grown considerably. I mean, even in my 9 years, it was $5 million roughly a year when I started.
Now it's 45
of annual fund, and at $5 million of fundraising alone, and now we're at $18 million of fundraising alone.
Did COVID help or hurt your fundraising activities?
COVID hurt, but we thankfully have been able to sustain our programs mostly because it didn't hurt as much as it potentially could have. We have many donors who stepped up, and while we took a slight step back during COVID, it was not at all the sort of devastating step back that I think some organizations experienced.
I share with you offline before the broadcast that I remember NCSY in Brooklyn about 35 years ago with Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan. He was part of NCSY. Very interesting, very inspirational person. I know he died at a very young age, but he still has an impact on NCSY today.
He does. He was hired by Rabbi Stolper, or engaged by Rabbi Stolper, who was was the founder of NCSY, and he should have a refuah shlema. He's not well, but he was so impressed with Rabbi Kaplan's ability to explain difficult Jewish concepts in ways that were understandable and digestible, that he engaged him to be part of NCSY, to come to events, to come to programs in Shabbatons, as well as to write books that would be digestible, consumable to an elementary Jewish audience. And what's incredible about his books, he wrote 10 titles for NCSY. And what's incredible about those books is that they are engaging and informative, both to an elementary audience as well as a more sophisticated Jewish learner. So they really are fantastic. We recently republished, in partnership with Art Scroll, all 10 of these titles, many of which had gone out of print, and they're now with some redesigned covers and updated illustrations, and very modest edits to some of the material. We were able to republish all 10 of these works from Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan, which are impactful. And we recently had a
they're really very good books. I enjoy reading them. He has a clear and concise way of explaining things, and he tackled some very difficult subjects, so he wasn't afraid to do that.
Without a doubt. And we were very proud to have relaunched the release of these books together with members of the Kaplan family. Rabbi Kaplan himself obviously passed away at a very young age, but his Rebbitzin should live and be well as 5 of his children were at our relaunch event about 5 weeks ago. And it was really a very touching occasion.
Rabbi Micah Greenland is our guest, International Director of NCSY. They're part of the Orthodox Union. They help bring public school kids more awareness about their Jewish heritage and roots. We're focused more on the non-Orthodox teenagers that are part of NCSY, but NCSY also works with Orthodox kids. How does that play out? Mingling non-Orthodox with Orthodox, is there tension? Are there problems? Do you have problems from yeshivas with mingling? So how do you deal with it?
So it's really, the answer is delicately, and we are
Double the pizza.
we have many occasions in which we will bring public school kids together with the yeshiva day school kids, and many times where it's yeshiva day school kids having one programs designed for them, and public school kids having programs that are designed for them. And when we do bring them together, it's generally mutually beneficial, but that's only the case because it's done carefully and with with a lot of staff involvement.
But I assume when you probably Shabbatonim, we have the takeaway for a weekend Shabbos retreat. I would assume you probably have more of a mixture because you want the non-Orthodox kids to see their counterparts doing the Jewish thing.
Correct. So it's that's the NCSY I grew up in. Actually, my involvement goes back to my elementary school years, and it was a two-way street where a public school kid could learn what kind of normal Jewish life looks like by being together with the Orthodox Jewish students, and the Orthodox kids could see what a wide-eyed, motivated, non-jaded public school kid is like, who's just interested in growth, and they never experienced Shabbos before, and they're just hungry to have such an experience.
Now, the Orthodox kids that participate in NCSY, I would assume they come from the modern Orthodox schools, not so much from the Hamish or right-wing community.
For the most part, that's the case. Although, in recent years, we have begun single gender programming for both for boys and for girls. We have in about 6 communities across North America a program called NCSY 4G, NCSY for Girls, which is attracting more and inspiring more of an audience that in single gender girls high schools and Beis Yaakov high schools, and a fledgling boys program similarly in Baltimore, and there's intention to expand these efforts over the coming years. I think everybody needs that inspiration.
Well, I would assume that when we see a problem in the Orthodox community with kids going OTD, off the derech, off the beaten path of Judaism, having such a program to go through, not through rope, but to instill more of the beauty of Judaism would be something that even the Haredi community want to do.
Precisely, and the OU as our parent organization is looking at the breadth and depth of the entire Jewish community and saying where there's a problem, we want to step in and address it.
The OU can make it kosher.
Exactly right, God willing.
Now, have you had, because you have mingling Orthodox and non-Orthodox boys and girls together for the modern Orthodox, have you had weddings or people who have met because of that? And has that happened over the course of time? And
absolutely. Rabbi Stolper was fond of saying that the second greatest thing NCSY does for the Jewish community is make shidduchim, and so you're clearly alluding to that, and it's definitely. I met my wife. We were actually both volunteer counselors, advisors in NCSY when we met one another. But there are certainly hundreds, I believe thousands of Jewish homes that have been built that way by couples that met each other in the NCSY context.
Now, the Jewish community has changed over the course of time, where I would assume that a lot of the NCSY kids or teenagers that came from conservative and reform backgrounds. Today, we're seeing that the conservative movement, the reform movement, now what it was, you have more assimilation, more acculturation. In fact, Chabad is probably one of the fastest growing movements in the non-Orthodox world because they've attracted both conservative and reform. How has that affected the dynamics of NCSY?
I wrote about this recently in Jewish Action magazine, the OU's magazine. I think it's certainly more challenging to attract the audiences today when the baseline of Jewish knowledge is generally lower today than it was a generation ago. That said, we make efforts to mitigate that. This JSU program that we have in public high schools across the country allows us to anybody who identifies in any way Jewishly
But you have to
has
check
an easy.
you have to check if they're halakhically Jewish. And when they go
Generally,
on
for the club itself, we don't. It's open even to non-Jews who identify not as non-Jews. Once they get more involved, then we definitely have to.
I'm sure you've had such situations. How do you deal with it?
Delicately again. We certainly our expectation is that we're running a program with under halachic guidance, and at the same time, we're not looking to introduce turmoil into the home of into the life of a teen and drive any sort of conflict, tension between them and their parents. So the answer is through communication and delicate handling of those situations.
It could be very challenging because you have somebody interested in Judaism and they may not be halakhically Jewish.
That's correct.
What do you say to them? They're thirsty for it. They want it. And
effectively, it in a nutshell, it boils down to once they're at a point of maturity that they can understand that they're not halakhically Jewish, then they need to make a choice. And the choice is either to pursue halachic conversion or to walk away. That our environment is designed for Jewish kids. But we're careful to only introduce that at a stage of maturity where we involve the parents, where a kid is mature enough and they can accept such a converation.
Have you had halachic conversions where you've helped facilitate that during the course?
Many.
So let me ask you this. We have a few moments left. There's so much to cover. We have to have you back again.
I appreciate it.
How do you do a situation where, let's say a kid is halakhically Jewish and he comes to JSU club, involved in NCSY. He wants to be kosher. He wants to be Shomer Shabbos. He's living at home. His parents are not religious. And I'm sure a lot of them are not very sympathetic to their child going through this religious conversion. How do you deal with that? I know it's going to be delicate, but.
So that is, of course, the answer. But it happens to be that it happens to be that the phenomenon of parents wanting to be, which is a social phenomenon that's happened over the last several years, is parents want to they want to be friends with their teens more so than ever before. They're not looking for conflict or tension. They're looking for facilitation. And when a teen feels that there's something that genuinely gives purpose to their life, meaning to their life, whereas a generation or two ago that would lead to conflict with parents, today increasingly it's appreciated and welcomed by the parents. It makes it much easier for us to A, to do our work, and B, to partner with parents in the effort, where it's the kid, the parent, and the organization.
Oh, because I would say probably from what I hear, there's a lot of conflict, even with older people dealing with religion. I hear all kinds of stories, so I could imagine there's probably some conflict if they see
it certainly has happened, and what our intention is to do the very best we can to build bridges with parents, channels, have open channels of communication, so that we're partners in this regard and not adversaries.
Rabbi Micah, Greenland, International Director of NCSY. Glad we opened up our channel. You're doing amazing work and bringing people back to their Jewish roots and helping both the non-Orthodox and Orthodox kids. You're not limited just to one. So we appreciate your being here with us. If people want to learn more about NCSY, how can they do so?
Our website is great way to do that, ncsy.org. And we have great listings of our programs there, as well as general information about how to get involved.
Terrific. We got to have you back again and keep up the good work. And
thank you, Zev. I appreciate it.
We got to get full funding for public school kids to go to Israel.
I like the push. All right, we need more philanthropic partners.
Absolutely, because it doesn't start in college. College is way late. Even high school is late, but the earlier the better.
We agree.
Thanks for listening.
For continuous Jewish programs, TalklineNetwork.com, or our 24-hour-a-day listen line at 641-741-0389. For past shows, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, Instagram, and all major podcast platforms, or jewishpodcast.org. Thanks for listening to the TalklineNetwork.com.